hope you're doing well. Before we start, huge thanks to OperaGX for sponsoring this video. Last time I told you about OperaGX's CPU limiters, customization, and Twitch Discord integrations. So this time I'll show you a couple of new features GX has to offer, starting with chat browsing. Yep, now you have the ability to browse the chat via Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, Instagram, and ВКонтакте without having to change tabs every couple seconds. Next is a cool feature that helps you stylize your browser without having to go all the way down to the settings. All you gotta do is press Easy Setup right here at the top right corner of the browser, click on Get More Wallpapers, select Animated, and choose the wallpaper you like by clicking Add to Opera. This way you can just easily switch between wallpapers whenever you want. And speaking of easy setups, your Chrome extensions, bookmarks, and even your phone data can all be synced to OperaGX. The Chrome extensions you can add like you do normally by going to the page and pressing Install. With the bookmark import, all you gotta do is simply go to Browser Settings, Synchronize, and import the bookmarks by clicking right here. And with the phone, all you gotta do is install the browser on your phone, connect it to Opera's flow through a QR code, and bam! Now you can easily send files, videos, and notes between browsers. And last but not least, the most important feature of today, Force Dark Pages. A feature that's designed to darken any page for all us nocturnal creatures who are always blinded by the light. So download OperaGX today, leave the hashtag InstallGX with your top 5 favorite games down below, and I'll respond to the hashtagged comments to tell you whether or not you're cultured. FYI, the Dishonored series is the best game series in the world and I will fight you on it. Thank you. Arcane is right around the corner and the hype is real. So in today's video, I'll give you a clear picture of what you're getting yourselves into and why so many of us lore nerds are super excited. At first I was thinking of making separate videos about Piltover and 𝗀, but since the two are so strongly intertwined, I decided to merge them together without making it too overwhelming. I'll be covering their stories, key champions, and their relationships with one another based on both the League of Legends lore and Legends of Runeterra cards. And for those of you who just want to jump into specific topics, I will leave timestamps in the description down below. So without further ado, let's get started. Piltover 𝗀 is a dual city-state. The divide between social classes is astronomical and is the main reason for the conflicts that we will talk about later in this video. It's the home to the incredibly wealthy, incredibly poor, the batshit crazy, and the very unfortunate. But the interesting part is that it wasn't always like that. You see, more than 3,000 years ago, Piltover was actually part of 𝗀, or as they used to call it in ancient Shuriman, 𝗂𝗏 and 𝗂𝗏𝗏. It was a Shuriman port that was meant for safe sea passage and trading, but the problem was they didn't have the proper access to Eastern and Western Valoran, so they decided to create one by, wait for it, nuking the whole area. By using thousands of chemtech bombs, they thought they'll be able to simply crack open an area of the land for a cavern to be created. But of course, like with any dumb fucking idea, the plan didn't play out the way that they thought it would, because all it did was cause a series of earthquakes that completely destroyed the land and sank a whole chunk of 𝗀 with its thousands of citizens to the bottom. And to make things worse, it released a poisonous gas into the city's surviving areas. Luckily, 𝗀𝗏, or as they used to call her, 𝗂𝗏, the Guardian, who also happened to be a spirit wind goddess, was called through the prayers of the people and managed to somewhat blow the gas away. It's actually pretty cool of her too, considering the fact that back then Shurima kind of tore down all of her statues. Yeah, during the time of Ascension, the Emperor decided to release decrees to suppress false idols, which is quite ironic because technically ascendant beings are kind of false idols. But luckily, despite the growing worship of the Ascendants, many still believed in 𝗀𝗏 and raised statues and shrines in gratitude for her benevolence in secret. Fun fact, but during the Darkin War, which I will make a video about eventually as well, 𝗀𝗏 shielded the city from the ongoing conflict. So although she's designed like a toilet paper fairy, she's actually a major baddie. So now that we know how 𝗀 came to be, where the hell did Piltover come from? Eventually, 𝗀 was rebuilt, and with it the Sun Gates that forced all oceanic transports through 𝗀. This brought immense wealth to the city, which eventually led to Piltover's construction and elevation from 𝗁. Those who became part of it were the families who were in control of the taxes and trade produced by the Sun Gates, who then became clans, and who then built a whole society around aristocratic oligarchy, while 𝗁 was left down under, fending for itself. So now we got two major cities, one that is called the City of Progress, which is a city made by the rich for the rich, and the City of Iron and Glass, a polluted, toxic swamp. And while in the upper levels people might still thrive, in the sumps things are so bad that the people there started a whole cult revolving around a spider god. No, not 𝗲𝗏𝗻𝘂, 𝗬𝗏𝘂. Yeah, he kinda promised them to make 𝗁 great again by gassing Piltover, and they just went with it. Needless to say, his followers didn't really last long, and some of them were actually 𝗲𝗏𝗻𝘂's childhood friends. And although he was eventually arrested, he's still out there chilling and scheming. Which is quite ironic, because as a 𝗁ite who battles against the government, he still holds onto his very Noxian extremist principles and uses them to enhance his god complex. Because nothing says anarchy like a good old cult. Now, the pollution in 𝗁 comes mostly from the countless factories and laboratories that create synthetic hex crystals. The waste is then spewed into the environment, creating toxic pools and hazardous living conditions that are mostly blamed on the 𝗵𝗵𝗻𝗻𝗃 and their rich friends up in Piltover who own these facilities. So you could probably imagine why the 𝗁ites are not fans of their sun-stained oppressors, fancy tech, and obvious wealth. Even so, thanks to the thriving of their black market, chemtech, and mechanical augmentation, they still find ways to prosper, even if the situation is pretty freaking dire. Now, all the champions in these two cities play major roles in its past and present lore, some of which we already know of, and some that we will learn about with the release of Arcane. The story of Arcane will most likely be set in the past, but maybe further down the road we'll get a glimpse of the present as well. So now that we know a little about everything there is to know about Piltover and 𝗁, let's go over the characters that were introduced to us. 𝗲 was an orphan from 𝗁 who made her way up to become a Piltovan enforcer. We know she's an absolute baddie who solves most of her issues with violence, unless Caitlyn is there to stop her, but we don't know much about her early childhood. Besides some bits and pieces like how she grew up in an orphanage down in the sumps, found her fighting mentor in a bar, and had some sort of sisterhood relationship with Jinx, there isn't much else. We do know that something crucial happened in her past, something that pushed her away from both Jinx and 𝗁 and made her into a Piltovan enforcer. Because like I mentioned before, the people of 𝗁 were never fans of Piltover, and having one of their own joining their forces can be kinda seen as somewhat of a betrayal. So I guess the series will shed some light on these plot holes and help us understand how she reached her career. Jinx is one of the biggest mysteries of Runeterra, because from the very beginning she was introduced to us like a teenage Harley Quinn on steroids. And even with her stories, comic series, and cinematics, nothing really gave off the vibe that there was a deep, dark secret behind her character. To us, she was no different than Ziggs or Zoe, just an edgy, quirky kid. That's up until the point Swain, Warwick, and Fiddle got their reworks. Through their interactions, we were hinted at a much darker history revolving a mass explosion that she somehow caused. With the release of Arcane, we've seen a completely different side to Jinx. A shy little girl who depended on others and who was forced to deal with her own demons. A lot of us were shocked because we never thought that Jinx could be normal. Which brings us to the next question. What happened? What pushed her into total insanity? What was it that tore her and 𝗲 apart? How did she end up with Silco? And what was the infamous explosion everyone keeps mentioning? All of that will probably be covered in the series and help shed some light on the mystery that is Jinx. It's Warwick. It has to be Warwick. He falls perfectly under the category of 𝗲's mentor since both him and her have bars for their background. Not to mention that we've already had a glimpse of what he looked like in his human form, which connects perfectly to their interaction where he asks her who taught her how to punch. When it comes to Warwick, all we know about him is what Sinch told us. He was a cutthroat who had to be very heavily sedated before he was kidnapped and brought to the lab to be experimented on. Warwick doesn't remember much of his past life since he was literally discarded as a failed experiment that pulled out an Uno reverse card, but the voice interactions he does have are very crucial points to his history. He knows what Singed did to him. He recognizes Vi, and he remembers Jinx as someone who was somewhere she wasn't supposed to be in and is part of something he wants to forget. And honestly, if Vander is in fact Warwick, this is going to be so freaking painful. Because seeing him as a normal human being after knowing what he had gone through in Singed's lab is going to be absolutely tragic. Silco gives mad Singed energy. And I feel that just like with Warwick, his name has been altered somewhere along the line so he could just stay hidden and keep doing his creepy shit. And honestly, if we get to see early days Singed, y'all better strap the fuck up because we'll be in for a ride. And that's because Singed wasn't always insane. At the beginning, he was actually a young Piltover University student. The only reason he ended up in 𝗤𝗏 was because his peers didn't share the same views he did, and after ridiculing him for quite some time, he was kicked out. Kind of like Viktor, which I'll be talking about later in the video. In 𝗤𝗏, he quickly found himself a job in the chemtech industry, started doing some shady-ass experiments, and in the end created his own radioactive pixie sticks and turned himself into an absolute fucking junkie. You would think doing all these drugs will eventually stop him, but wrong. Homeboy might have been zooted, but that didn't stop him from making a slime child weapon, a werewolf, and a bomb for LeBlanc to nuke Ionia. Yes, if you didn't already know, he was the one who created a gas that murdered thousands of Ionians and Noxians. Is Silco truly him? I don't know. But either way, the idea is out there. We'll have to watch the show to understand what exactly was his role in all of this and what the hell did he want from Jinx. With Caitlyn, things are a lot more simple. You got a posh girl from a rich family whose parents get kidnapped, she ends up playing Sherlock Holmes, finds them, and they all live happily ever after. Like, don't get me wrong, she'd seen some shit like child kidnappings and human experimentation, but the biggest mystery in her story was who was it that kidnapped her parents. All she had was a clue in the form of a code name 𝗤𝘂𝗍, which is exactly what pushed her into law enforcement. But when her card was revealed in Legends of Runeterra, we were told who 𝗤𝘂𝗍 was, which, spoiler alert, is 𝗃𝗃, who is an influential 𝗤𝗏 chem baroness. Her whole thing is gather deadly ingredients for a chemical arsenal she makes from rare plants she grows herself. The interesting bit is that she was actually pretty close to Caitlyn. In fact, they even worked together at some point. But clearly something happened for her to kidnap her parents and then lure Caitlyn into a trap. Basically, 𝗃𝗃 is a better poison ivy than Princess Cabbage over here, has more skins and character development than 𝗤𝗏, and is probably going to become a future champ. And they were roommates! Here's the thing about these two. Their lore is actually based off one another. So on one end, you have selfish, handsome boy Vander, and on the other end, you have the skinny, soft boy who crawled out of 𝗤𝗏 to pursue his dreams. The two were pretty good friends until their moral and creative differences hit the fan. The falling apart affected Jayce so hard that he went as far as not to side with Viktor when their mutual professor took all the credit of 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃's creation, when in fact, Viktor was the father. That betrayal threw Viktor into a spiraling depression that caused him to take the first step into human augmentation, erasing his emotions and obsessing with the human enhancement he called the Glorious Revolution. Meanwhile, Jayce was taken in by a bougie Piltovan family. Through that connection, he met 𝗃𝗃𝗽𝗃, who gave him a Brekkerin crystal for experimentation. Which means that Skarner's entire family went through cogwheel centrifuge, superheating, deep freezing, and all the way down to having a chunk taken away from them to be electrocuted by a voltage so strong that made Jayce hear their screams. Fucked up, isn't it? By the way, the hammer he uses? Yeah, that's powered by Skarner's family. And if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure that Caitlyn's gun is also powered by Skarner's family. Piltover. Anyway, Viktor realized that for him to be able to push through with the Glorious Revolution, he would probably need that crystal that Jayce has been experimenting on, so he did the wise decision of going into his laboratory and stealing it. Jayce then decided to go to Viktor's laboratory, confronted him, almost killed himself in the process, managed to bury Viktor's lab, became a hero to all of Piltover, and all while knowing that Viktor was probably still somewhere out there. It's important to point out that in one of his newest short stories, we actually learned that Viktor never really rushed to augment anyone. He truly tries to help others from the goodness of his heart and will go as far as help a kid against his bullies. So although it does seem like he's playing Frankenstein in the sumps, I really hope Arcane is not going to try and make him into some grade A villain. I also hope he retains his Russian accent, because if not, I will fight Netflix on sight. There's a lot more to the Russian language than the evil genius stereotype, so put some goddamn respect on our culture. Mel is new in all things Riot. She's not shown or mentioned in League of Legends nor lore, but if you do some Slavic digging, you might actually find her full name next to her Russian voice actor. And her full name is 𝗵𝗵𝗻. You might recognize the name 𝗬𝗪𝗻 from the infamous 𝗬𝗪𝗻 heirloom map. The 𝗬𝗪𝗻 clan was the one who created Piltover's Sun Gates, therefore they are the elite of the elite in the Piltovan society. We don't have much information about Mel, but we do know about Jay, the heir of the family who doesn't want to have anything to do with his posh life, and 𝗬𝗀, the current master of the clan. My guess is that she's 𝗬𝗀's daughter and Jay's sister. But since I don't know what timeline 𝗬𝗀 really belongs to, we'll just have to wait and see. And based off of those Russian leaks, we also know that Ekko is also going to be in Arcane. Ekko's story is actually really interesting because it gives you a glimpse of what it is actually to be a working class in 𝗁. His parents are both factory workers who are trying to do everything they can to give Ekko the education he deserves because he is so intelligent. Ekko, on the other end, doesn't really want to have anything to do with Piltover, because he sees the potential in 𝗁. We also know that he had some sort of connection to Jinx before she went insane, and I guess in the series we'll actually be able to see their friendship. Now, when it comes to Professor Cecil B. Heimerdinger, just like with any other Yordle, there isn't much information. He's a Yordle, he's a genius, and he holds all of Piltover by the balls. Besides him being the university's headmaster, there isn't much else we know about. And honestly, I think what we really care about is whether or not they're using glamour. Like, do they know that he's a Yordle and letting it slide because he's a genius? Or are we seeing him in this form because a lot of the people who will be watching Arcane and will be new to the world of Runeterra don't know what Yordles are? So here's the champions that we're left with. Blitzcrank, Dr. Mundo, Janna, Twitch, Urgot, Zac, and Ziggs, then Camille, Ezreal, Orianna, and the one that shall not be named. In 𝗁, I would expect to see Blitz, Viktor's invention, Urgot, 𝗲𝗁 and Caitlyn's nemesis, and Janna, 𝗁's deity. In Piltover, I'd expect to see Camille, since her family is one of the wealthiest in Piltover, and the one who runs the biggest Brecker and Crystal business in there. The same business Caitlyn's parents are in as well. And the rest of the characters can really just show up as Easter eggs because I don't really see how they can add anything to this plot. And that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can check out my Patreon, donation pages, or become a member. Huge thanks to today's supporters: 𝗬𝗏𝗏, It's Fine Pal, Bacon, Diamond, Fabian, Torben, Ida, Nox, Jayce, Kovu, 𝗬𝗵𝗆𝗍, 𝗃𝗏𝗍, Clockwork Ronin, and 𝗬𝗏𝗍𝗫 for making this video possible. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye!
Bonjour.